Hey everybody, welcome back to the Alfie Whattam podcast. This is episode 87. As always, the Alfie Whattam podcast is brought to you by WeLoveAlpha.com. If you're looking to hire software engineers in the UK, whether that's front end, back end, or full stack, go to WeLoveAlpha.com to find the developers that you need to scale your team and company. Links in the description. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Rue Perez. Rue is the head of engineering for Vital. He's previously worked for Sphere, which was acquired by Twitter, as well as companies like Babylon Health and The Mail Online and Just Eat, William Hill, and other very popular UK brands. Rue, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
No problem, mate. Well, I've given you a brief intro there, mate, but could you fill in the blanks? Just tell us a little bit more about yourself. Who is Rue and what your background is, please.
Sure. So most of my background has actually been in mobile, in iOS. I've been working around since 2010. And then at Babylon Health, I had the opportunity to start managing a team. We started with around 7-8 people. Then we blitz scaled to around 25 when I left. Mm-hmm. Then I decided to move again back to IC at Sphere. And then eventually, I actually wrote quite extensively about it, but then I decided to go back to engineering management.
Sure.
And yeah, the opportunity to work at Vital came up. It's with one person that I used to work at Babylon Health, so it made sense, and so far so good.
Awesome. And quite a similar industry to Babylon in many respects, in that it involves health. For those that don't know, though, could you just tell us a little bit more about Vital and what you guys do?
Sure. So Vital, in a nutshell, is we provide a single API for you to get fitness and health data. So you can imagine that you have different providers. You have things like Garmin, Strava, Fitbit, and usually these integrations can be quite tricky to get right. They have very particular behaviors. Some of them are documented, some of them are not documented. And we try to do our best to provide a single API that you can connect. So you can give a link to a user and they can connect their devices. And yeah, we provide a single API for that.
That's cool. Makes it a lot simpler. Okay, so the wearables market is something that I'm fascinated by, and at the moment, the way that I see it is that it's pretty much dominated just by smartwatches. However, there are a lot of innovations from smart rings to smart clothing I've talked about on the podcast before with a lot of guests. Even AR and VR could be classed as a wearable. I mean, it technically is. You are wearing it. So when you've got the emergence of all these new things, and obviously watches being currently the dominant device, where do you see the future of wearables, Rue? Do you think it is going to remain the same, perhaps, with watches leading the front and these new areas just being sort of side projects, or do you think some of those have the potential to take over as major players as well?
That's a good question. It's difficult. I have my own opinion, my personal opinion, but then I have to put that in context of Vital's work.
Sure.
So yeah. A lot of things is sometimes just having access to that data, right? Even independent from where it's coming from, a couple of providers make it quite difficult to have that data available. So if we're able to get some data, we are quite happy. But there's also the balance between how many people actually use that, how many customers would be interested in having that data. So we can see that more and more. We can see people using it, and Apple Watch and Apple Health Kit, it's a pretty big player, and most of our customers will ask for that. Do you have access to this? Yes or no? And we see that as it's simply because of the amount of people that have an Apple Watch or an iPhone. It's simply the quantity and the number of people that have one of these devices that really makes us interested in integrating with them.
Yeah. The new Apple Watch, for example, is heavily built towards the more adventurous type person. Even the ad has got people scuba diving, climbing up icy mountains, and that sort of thing. Do you feel that's the direction that a lot of wearables will head in that they're not just designed for runners, but they're designed for, because it just started with cardio really, and with Fitbits and that sort of thing. But now it seems like it's almost there for any type of adventure and sport person.
Yeah, I think the issue with the Apple Watch is really the battery.
Yeah.
So the new one really helps on that regard, independently if you do something extreme or not. Right. So just the fact that you don't have to charge it every day, that's a big plus. I would say that for people that do longer things like ultra marathons, or I don't know, Ironmans, like they would probably go to something like Garmin. I would say, because it's not just the hardware. Actually, Garmin does a lot of things in the background. It really helps you sort of understand where you are with your training. Are you improving? Are you stagnating? Where are you? And I think there's a lot of room for improvement on the Apple Watch, at least in terms of the software side. What can be done? I think it's lacking a little bit on that, but at least the improvements on the hardware compared to just regular Apple Watch are very much welcome.
Oh, absolutely. Even from a safety perspective, the new Apple Watch can detect if you've been in a car accident and automatically call for help, which is pretty cool. With Vital, then, is my thesis correct in that most of the data is still coming from smartwatches? And I suppose you mentioned the health kit, so that's like the iPhone, and it connects to your other devices with steps. Is that where the majority of stuff is coming from, or are you seeing smart rings, smart clothing? Is that becoming a thing, or is that still very much in idea phase in terms of the industry?
Yeah, I'm actually using a ring. I use a Oura
ring. Cool. Very cool.
But the majority of them would come either from just a Fitbit, like in the wrist, or a Whoop as well in the wrist, or a Garmin. So the majority of them would come from something that you can put in your wrist. Either you can't see time or not. That's a different question, because for example, Whoop wouldn't show you anything, but it's just there gathering data. So that's helpful. I think it becomes tricky to get HR. So getting heart rate data, it really depends on the device, and the majority of people want to know that sort of information. How much intensity, even if you're just walking. So it's interesting because, for example, Whoop cares about the intensity of your walking or your activity. It's not so much about the number of steps. For example, the typical 10,000 steps per day. It's not just that, but it's more about how fast are you doing them, how much intensity are putting into those. So it's interesting. It's interesting how this is going to develop.
What does your ring measure? Is that sleep, or is there something else?
It's activity, so your daily activity, like steps. But also the sleep. I find it very comfortable to sleep compared to the majority of devices that are out there. I also have a Garmin. I also have an Apple Watch. It's just the fact that you have a ring, you don't really feel it. You just wear it and that's it. You don't feel that there's anything there. I think the most important thing is really how regular you are with your device. Not necessarily how accurate it is, because at least you can compare trends, and if you're improving or not.
It's really the consistency, isn't it? If you use it very occasionally, the data set just won't be very accurate. Even if the data is not 100% reliable over a long enough period of time, you'll start to catch trends. Okay. Some people are concerned with wearables from more of a privacy point of view. They think, why should Apple potentially have my medical information, or why should Samsung or Garmin have my health records? That they're worried about that data being misused and potentially using it to sell to you, or potentially even hacking and other negative areas. What are your thoughts on the privacy side of wearables?
Apple is quite strict on that. So in terms of consents, like it's always very clear for the user that you are sharing a particular data point with someone else. So Apple on that front, I would say that they do the most compared to everyone else. But even places like Strava, Garmin, when you put your credentials and you get a prompt saying, look, this company is about to have access to your data. Which sort of data do you want to give access to these people? So they try to make it very explicit, as in, do you consent with this, with sharing this data?
The scope for potential product recommendations is something that fascinates me in this space, because I remember a very similar story. This was a couple of years back. I think it might have been Walmart in the States. There was a young girl who was buying products from the store, and she was buying products related to I suppose having a kid, or stuff that you'd buy if you were pregnant. And then she started receiving like coupons through the door, recommending different baby products, and the father found this. He was upset. He had no idea at the time. He went to the store, and then it was revealed she was pregnant, and obviously the stuff was recommended because of that. I can see. I'm flash forwarding to watching the BBC 5 years from now in my mind, where somebody's suing Tesco because they were recommended some diabetes medication or some product because their watch had told them this. They'd sold that data to a third party like Amazon or Sainsbury's or whoever. Do you see that sort of thing potentially happening in a couple of years, or do you think people will more likely follow the Apple privacy model of paying, making their money more in subscriptions rather than that personalized level of ads?
It's a good question. My take on this is thinking where the company does money. How did they make money? So if a company is offering a device for free, or a service for free, is usually you are the product, and they need to find a different angle to make money out of you. So for example, companies now with Aura, for example, what they do is you pay for the device, but you also pay for a subscription. So there's money flowing into Aura. So that's their business model, and that's how they make money. What we saw in previous business models would be you buy the device and that's it. And now you sort of expect to have maintenance and improvements over, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years. But the reality is you only pay the £100 for a device. So you need to start questioning how do these people actually make money out of this? So that's why it's nice to sometimes to not put a lot of money in front, but then you have to wonder how they make money out of me. Right, so that's really the question. So I always ask, where is the angle here from these different companies?
No, it's probably the best way to look at it. What is their business model? How are they making money? If you're not buying something largely up front, then you buy the product, and your data will be sold to keep the business alive. I was recently asked to invest in a wearable for dogs that tracked their level of exercise. I didn't, but it sounded maybe like a decent idea the more I look into this space, because people will spend anything for their pets, won't they? It's like their family, within reason. What do you make of wearables for pets? Is this something that you've seen, or is this just an out of the blue idea which came to me?
I would ask, are they still in business?
It was only a couple of weeks ago, so I'd imagine so.
Okay. I don't know. I find that maybe a bit weird. I don't know, because I think the most interesting thing for me is, even for companies like Strava, Garmin, etc., is once you have that raw data, like steps, etc., what do you do with that? What sort of insights do you provide to the person? So I'm thinking about from the animal angle. Okay, I know that my dog walked 5,000 steps, but in reality, what am I supposed to do with that? And I think that's where the majority of companies fell a bit short of what they could really accomplish, because what people really want is, I don't care if I walk 10,000 steps. I don't care about that. What I care is what is the impact of doing that in my daily life?
Yeah, the results. I kind of envision that it could work in the sense that it will tell you if you have or haven't walked your dog enough in that day based on a lot of different factors. But I suppose you could make the argument, Rue, that the smart wearables are already being used in animals in the form of microchips and that sort of thing. So I suppose, or AirTags, if you were to consider them a wearable. I mean, only if you know that you've purposely put it on yourself, it's a wearable. Otherwise, it's something malicious,
I mean, my cats have a hair tag, so I mean,
yeah.
yes.
I got an AirTag as well for my puppy, and it's they're useful. I mean, I remember back a couple of years ago, it was a different brand. I think it was Tile that was the market leader. I think
Yeah.
Apple has done a good job in establishing, you know, their product category in that world. But I suppose when we look at areas like AirTags and the fact that they're getting smaller and smaller, part of me sees this inevitably, whether this is good or bad, them getting to the point where they're so small where it goes from a laptop to a phone to a watch to AR glasses to embedded under your skin in the form of some kind of chip, whether we put that on to do other things as well, open doors, pay, you know, with NFC technology and so on. But obviously there's potentially a way to track steps and how with exercise with that. Are you with me in that you predict that probably will happen in a couple of years, or do you think that's perhaps a little bit too far and people will never go for it?
I'll say that how intrusive is to add that.
Yeah.
I would say that if you need a general anesthetic to put a device, I would say that most people are not interested in that. I would say that if it's as simple as an injection on your arm,
yeah,
and obviously depends on the functionality, of course, but I think a lot of people would be interested in that.
Yeah.
One of them would be, for example, people with diabetes.
Sure.
To measure the glucose levels. I think that would be a game changer for them.
Yeah. For people, like, I think that will be the way that it probably starts. People with pre-existing medical conditions, they can have some kind of implant injection, and it will help prevent something that's already there. However, those people suddenly then have a superpower over the rest of us. They are half cyborg. You know, the singularity has reached us at that point. So we then, people without those conditions, my logic takes me to the fact that they probably will start doing something similar as well in order to almost stay competitive. The most extreme example would be Elon Musk's Neuralink sort of situation, how he's trying to build a chip in our brain. But before we get to the brain, which is obviously a lot more complex, we will probably start to deal with areas like diabetes that you mentioned as well. But it's a tricky one to say. Like, I don't know how many years from now we're talking until this is commonplace, but next 10 years, maybe it's just as common to have an Apple Watch as it is to have a small chip in you that can help with payments and health data and that sort of thing. Would that be far-fetched, or do you think 10 years could be possible?
I don't think so. I think it's already happening. For example, if you look at companies like Ultrahuman, where you put a badge to measure your glucose levels, even if you're not a diabetic.
Yeah.
The goal is really just to see your sugar levels while you're competing, while you're doing some activity. So you can tune in your nutrition while observing what are your levels. So that is already happening. And if I have to say, that's a massive advantage for a person that is doing, a 5 to 10 hours ultra marathon.
Absolutely.
Where you're just tweaking and you know exactly, or you have a pretty good idea if you're hitting the wall, how much you need to eat, etc. Like that's already a massive advantage over a lot of people.
Yeah. I can see, athletes especially, that they could be using this technology in a massive way. It will almost be at the point where I remember watching a documentary about the the whole doping situation with cyclists a while back, and there was a point where in order to get into the top 20, 30 people, you had to be doping. Otherwise, it just wasn't possible to get into that top tier level. This obviously is nothing that's illegal right now in athletics. I don't believe that. I don't see why it would be, but it will probably be a situation where in order to be one of those top people, you will have to be using something like this on a daily basis to figure out how to improve, how to get better. And that makes sense. Yeah.
I know for a fact that top athletes are doing that.
Yeah.
So one of them is just measuring your heart rate variability.
Okay.
So this tells you, this measurement tells you how much rested you are, yeah, how much stressed your body is. And I know for a fact, because they say they used it and they use this measurement, that it's something that they pay close attention to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. If we take a step back from wearables for a second, then just from a software engineering perspective, you've been in this field for a long time. You've been an individual contributor. You've developed a lot of code. You've also built, scaled, managed teams. What advice would you give to the software developers that are watching this? So the majority of our audience are in tech and are engineers, people that are perhaps starting out their career, or maybe they've been in it for a few years. What sort of pieces of advice do you wish perhaps you knew when you were at their level a couple of years back? What recommendations, tips, insights would you give to those people listening?
I would say that if you're starting, I would suggest to find something that you just like to do. And this might seem obvious, but a lot of people might be chasing a bigger salary, bigger remuneration. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think when you focus on something that you like, it brings a lot of motivation and that allows you to go for a longer period of time. So I would say, I would give that my suggestion. I can also say that the biggest regret I have in my professional career was because I was chasing a bigger salary. And yeah, sure, it's always nice, of course, but there's a threshold where having a bigger salary is not really gonna massively impact your life. You're not gonna be a lot happier. So then you have to probably optimize for the 8-9 hours that you're working on a daily basis.
Sure.
It's sort of stuff that you really find interesting. So I'd say either look for a tech, either front end, back end, mobile, whatever, and then try to also focus on something that you're passionate about in terms of product, something that you yourself, you'd use it as a customer. And I think that really makes a satisfying professional career, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's similar to something Steve Jobs once said, where he said that, like, if you're not really, really, really passionate about what you're doing, you're probably going to fail, because you're not going to put in the work that's required compared to one of your competitors that might be really interested in this field, and they're just going to run rings around you because they're going to be willing to work harder. They're going to enjoy it. They're going to,
of course,
that energy is going to rub off on people. So if you're not happy with the industry, the job, the career that you're in, it's probably a good thing to reassess as quickly as possible. It's nothing. It's not a bad thing to get off that treadmill if it's not the right one for you. Okay. What about from the other side of the coin? You've built engineering teams. You've led developers. What advice would you give to people that are looking to scale their team, perhaps looking to recruit, looking to build culture, looking to retain staff and build a 10x team of engineers? What recommendations would you give to people that kind of going through that journey?
That's such a tricky question.
Yeah.
It's tricky because I would say that my approach now at Vital is a bit different than what I had at Babylon.
Sure.
At Babylon, the focus was to we're looking for a particular set of people that were keen on a particular technology that we believed would be fundamental for what we're doing, but also into the future. And that played quite nicely for us. So we're able to attract, I would say, a really good set of people at Babylon. At Vital, it's different because it's a smaller team. So we expect sort of slightly different behaviors. Like you look for people that have a lot of drive. You look at people that are quite independent and autonomous. You don't need to give a lot of guidance. As an example, we don't have product managers.
Sure.
Or anything. Like, the idea is you see a customer, you see a problem, you discuss with the team, and then you drive it.
Yeah.
This is something that we're not looking for at Babylon, because at Babylon we always had a PM that could sort of help you.
Much bigger organization.
Yeah. So it depends on what your context, what you're looking for. I'm not answering your question.
That's
it's
okay. That's
difficult to give
okay.
you a
No,
good
no,
answer
no.
on this.
Well, let me answer it in this way then. Ask it in this way rather. What advice would you give to people perhaps that are at large companies as managers looking to get the most out of their teams? So we'll start with Babylon and then we'll get onto Vital. Let's say you're in a large organization again and you went back to Babylon or somewhere else. What sort of things would you do to get the best out of your engineers?
Yeah, I think a tricky one is the larger the company. And I saw this at Babylon. I can see other examples in industry is, I would say there is a big portion of engineers that are not fully engaged in the work simply because they don't have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I could see that in the last year at Babylon that I have engineers occupy 70% of their time.
Yeah.
I could see that. So the tricky thing about large organizations is that you start to have a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape, a lot of meetings. People then start to not really. It's difficult to keep engineers engaged if the only thing they're doing is meetings and discussions. And it's good when an engineer, and I would have engineers, give me a task that I can stay 1 week working on that. I can just fully focus on this thing and I can just drive this. But it's difficult to find this, right? You have different teams and then sometimes you'd have a team that is dependent on the other. So there's a lot of discussion about, do I own this? Do you own this?
Yes.
How do we go about this particular thing? So a lot of my work as an engineer manager was trying to understand exactly what is this team supposed to do? What is the goal of this team? Making sure that they are as independent as possible from each other and they can be autonomous and fully own their vertical. But it's very tricky to do this. And the bigger the company, the more difficult it becomes.
I understand that full on from working from one of the largest recruitment companies in the world for over 5 years to then going to launching my own startup. It's a completely different set of goals and objectives needed when scaling. What about on the startup side then? What are you doing differently than you did at Babylon perhaps?
And a lot of reasons why people join us is or want to join Vital is really the idea that they can own their thing and they can drive big pieces. The canonical example is I don't want just to be changing colors of a button. I actually want to do meaningful stuff. And that's the reason why you get a lot of applicants. But then the question is, we're very pedantic about how you work in terms of how you write, how you express yourself. So communication is quite important for us because we also a remote team, a synchronous remote team. We have around 4 to 5 hours of meetings per week. So that's not a lot. That's actually quite little. So we evaluate communication a lot. I didn't really have that need at Babylon. So everyone is working in the office. Communication, even if you're not very good at communication because you're just physically next to the person, you can sort of mitigate that. So a lot of drive, because in a startup, you need people that are able to, you don't need to ask them to do the right thing. They intrinsically know that this is the thing that they should be doing. And this is a skill that, how do you interview for this? Right? How do you interview for this particular skill? So it's difficult. I would say that it's much more difficult to hire in a startup.
Well, it's a lot easier to hide at a big company if you are not as motivated perhaps as some other people are there, whereas in a startup you have to wear multiple hats, and it's pretty tricky to hide in a startup, especially if you're working directly with the founders or people that are running a large part of the company and that sort of thing. Okay, before we finish up, I was keen to ask you about your opinion of what's happening with the whole Twitter sphere, given that sphere was acquired by Twitter and you were a tech lead there for a while. Obviously, Elon talked about buying it, then he was not going to buy it, now he's bought it. Now he's reinstated a bunch of people that were banned. Now there's been a lot of chaos with the blue verified ticks, with brands being copied and posting stuff. It seems like Elon Musk is clearly incredibly successful in a number of areas. He knows how to build businesses. It seems like this has had a pretty rocky start, regardless of how if you like him or don't like him. Potentially he'll pull it off, and everybody will look back at these few weeks and go, he's a genius, or perhaps Twitter will crumble and we'll have something else. I mean, MySpace, Friendster, they all vanished at one point, right? What do you make of everything that's been happening in the past couple of weeks there?
I think we need another episode for that. But I think what I'm seeing right now is you have two teams. One of them is very much anti Elon Musk, as in this guy has no idea what he's doing. He's clueless. He destroyed the culture. He's not respecting people.
Yeah.
And then you have a different set of people saying this is good. These sort of tech companies that are bloated, they have too many employees. Most of them don't do much. And you have these two fields, and normally the truth is more or less in the middle somewhere. I think that his approach has been quite destructive. I think at this point probably 75%, 80% of the people left.
Something like that. Yeah.
I'm curious about the motivation of people that are there now. A lot of what's been talked is because people have visas, so they're stuck there. They cannot run away from there.
Sure. Okay.
So I would say that there's likely a percentage of people that are there because of that. I would say that there's also a percentage of people that are there because they're just excited about what it's going to bring. But then it depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
What is really happening there? I think it's tricky. I think you put it looking at what I've said, because a lot of work that is done at Twitter was in-house products, tech products. Yeah. Their infrastructure was on-premise. So there was a lot of tooling that was developed inside Twitter. So this is not something you can just buy off the shelf.
Yes.
And get it running. So I do wonder that if you fire 2 or 3 teams that have institutional knowledge about how to run these things, how exactly you're going to maintain these things?
Yeah.
How exactly you're going to onboard new engineers to deal with this if everyone is gone? I do wonder about these things, and I think he was maybe a bit too destructive, too harsh. I don't think he was very respectful of the people that were there. But part of me also thinks that I find it odd that a company like Twitter needs 7,000 people.
Yeah,
I have to say that I find it quite odd. I think they could probably do with a lot less people than that to get things going. And as a customer, when you look at features that are coming from Twitter, you do wonder, what are all these people doing? Because as a customer, I don't see a lot of stuff coming up new from Twitter, right?
Yeah,
things that
the past
things like communities.
It's been almost nothing, right? Spaces is a new thing, but this hasn't been much.
Yeah, exactly. And I think and from what I heard, Spaces was actually quite fast in development. I think they put it in their 8 players working on Spaces, and that's why there was, because this started with Clubhouse. So Clubhouse came in, and then they're okay. Let's try to catch up, and I think they did a good job. But I don't know. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. But I still think that he was pretty harsh, pretty caustic in how he started it. Yeah,
I'm probably of the exact same opinion of you, really. That there's clearly a middle ground between people that are saying he is the enemy of the people versus the people that are saying the complete opposite, really. It's clearly, it's not as simple as a black and white argument, really. But either we'll find out probably in a couple of weeks to a couple of months if the guy is an absolute genius or a ruthless genius, maybe, but or he's completely got it wrong this time and it crumbles. It does have me worried. I know people who have been let go from Twitter who were in teams of 20 people that are now 2 people, and they're running essential parts of the infrastructure that are keeping it going. look, I don't know. We'll have to wait and find out. But interesting getting your perspective anyway on it, given that you work for a company which was then acquired by Twitter.
Yeah. I get some gossip from Twitter, so that's always I get some insights from what's happening there. But even those insights are in two camps.
Yeah.
Even people that are employees have an opinion that some of those things that he's doing are not bad. Actually, people are excited about it.
Yeah.
So
let's wait and find out. Perhaps we can do another one of these in a few months. See what's happened after the dust and the rubble has gone, and we'll review it and come back to it.
Let's do that.
Okay. Cool. Well, look, thanks for coming on, Ru. It's good to get your insights, your perspectives into wearables, into advice for developers, leaders, and your thoughts on Twitter. Thanks to everybody for watching as well. Make sure that you're followed, subscribed, etc., on Spotify, where we're coming out every other week with conversations with technology leaders, CTOs, heads of engineering, technology recruiters, to give people the access, the insights into the world of tech. My face was just flashing red for those on video there. That's my light telling me the episode's over. But thanks very much for your time, Ru. Thanks for everyone for watching, and see you in the next episode.
Imagine if you were able to hire the next Elon Musk, or if you got a job at Facebook back when it was just a startup. Well, these people and these opportunities, they are still out there, and we have access to them. Access to all of them. At Alpha Technology, we specialise in software development recruitment across London and the UK. From React to Java to C# and more. We represent the best front-end, back-end, and full-stack engineers on the market. This includes top developers from Meta, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, and more. Our clients operate across AI, blockchain, VR, AR, fintech, edtech, healthtech, and more. From startups to global enterprises and everything in between. But Alpha isn't just a recruitment agency. We are also a tech community. We host podcasts, run meetup events, and lead ED&I initiatives, supporting women in technology, BAME individuals, and the Tech for Good ecosystem. So, if you're a company looking to hire software engineers, or if you're a developer open to new opportunities yourself, then we are here to help. Alpha Technology. Recruiting for the future.